Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to explore how to work with JSON data. JSON is quite common file format for working with data. It is one of the most common ways to exchange information between APIs. It's also used for different kinds of configuration files along with YAML file format. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It's not really JavaScript, but its syntax is derived from JavaScript language and looks very much like JavaScript objects. Don't worry, you don't need to know JavaScript for this. If you know Python dictionaries, those are very similar to JSON objects. Python has a built-in JSON library that's very useful for encoding and decoding JSON information. When you are working with APIs, it's quite common that those APIs are going to send or receive JSON data. It is language independent and pretty much every language has some sort of library for working with JSON data. Here I have got a long JSON string which I'm going to read into my Python file. If you take a look at this variable, it contains information about different users. It has collection of users. It is an array to be specific. You can see that each user object looks very similar to Python dictionaries. This is also a key value pair separated by colon symbol just like Python dictionaries. It's also quite intuitive and human readable format. The main difference is that it has to have double quotes for any string data to be a valid JSON object. The absence of value is indicated by null in JSON instead of none. Here I have got users information. Each user data has ID, name, email address, age, city, and country information. Some of the values are not available and have null values. ID and age are number data types. Everything else is string. The first user also has this additional field address, which has street name, zip code, and some other information. Let's see how we can read this data and extract the information out of it. In my Python file, I'm going to import that variable using from data import users. This will bring that JSON string in this local users variable. This is just for demonstration purposes. Usually you will get this JSON string from some sort of API or something else. I also need to import JSON module from Python to work with JSON data. Now I have access to all the functionalities from this Python module. To read this data, I can use json.loads function and I can pass any JSON string. It will parse this JSON string and convert it to an equivalent Python object. Let's store it in a variable JSON users. Let's check the data type of this variable by printing it. You can see that it is of type list. So this JSON load_as method converted JSON string into a list. When we use this function, it transforms the JSON data types into these data types on Python side. All the links I'm going to be showing in this video will be available in the description of this video. So make sure to check them out. JSON object is converted to a dictionary in Python. Array is converted to a list. Here you can see that we had an array of users and that's why we get back data in the form of list in Python. String data type gets converted into Python string. JavaScript only has number data type. It doesn't have separate data types for integer and floating point numbers. So numbers with integer values are converted to int and the ones with floating point are converted to floats in Python. Also, JavaScript true is returned like this with uppercase T and similarly for false with uppercase F. JavaScript null values are converted to none in Python. When we want to convert our Python data into JSON, the reverse conversion happens. If I only want the first user information, I can get that easily by using 0 index on this list object we got by reading this JSON string. This only prints the first user information. If I only want the name and email address information from this user, I can get them by using those keys. So here, let's print first user's name and email field. If I run this code, you can see that it prints only those two information for the first user. This is very handy because you don't need to use regex or any kind of string parsing to get the name and email address from the JSON string. You can simply load them and use it like any other Python object. JSON module automatically converts JSON data into Python dictionaries. If you need information that's nested inside another object, let's say for example, for this first user, I want to get the zip code of this user. I can get that using JSON users 0 and then I select the address field that will return the complete address object. I only want the zip code, so I write zip. If I run this code, it will print the zip code for the first user. If you want to write JSON string from a Python dictionary, that's also pretty easy. In that case, you can use json.dumps function for dumping JSON data and pass the dictionary object into it. It will automatically convert Python data types into equivalent JavaScript data types. Let's try dumping our JSON users object we created here and see if it converts into the same JSON string. Here, I will write json.dumps and pass JSON users object we have here. If I print this, you can see that it prints this JSON string with every string object in double quotes. We can make it look a little bit better if we pass the second argument of indent equals 2. If I run this code, you can see that it pretty prints our JSON data with indentation of 2 on every level. So here you can see our first user is Rita Graham with age as null. That's great, but how do you load data from JSON files? It turns out that it has consistent API with similar arguments as load_s method. Load_s function is used to load JSON data from string, and the reverse is dumps for printing data in JSON format. For reading data from files, we can use load function instead of load_s, and for writing a JSON file, we can use dump function instead of dumps function. Here I have got this sample courses.json file with an array that contains minimal information for few courses. It has course name, teacher name, and number of lessons for each course. I want to read this file in Python. The process will be very similar to reading any other file. If you don't know how to work with files, I will provide a link to that video in the description of this video. First of all, we need to open this file. I can use the with context block for that with open courses.json as JSON file. Here I can load complete JSON file using json.load function and I need to pass this JSON file object into this function. Let's save it to a courses variable. Our original file had data in array format, and that's why it returns a list with all the courses inside it. We can iterate through each course and then let's print name of each course using print course name. If I run this code, it prints only the name information for each of the course from our original JSON file. Similarly, to write JSON file, I can use dump function from JSON module. This time I need to first read the data. Here I have got JSON data from user string into this JSON users variable. To write it into a file, first I have to open the file for writing. It will be very similar to how we read a file, except that we have to specify the write mode while opening a file. With open users.json in write mode as users file. Once I have opened the file, I can use json.dump function. This function takes minimum 2 arguments. The first one is the object we want to write into the file. Here I want to write the JSON users object we created at the top. The second argument is going to be the file pointer we opened here for writing. If I run this code, it creates a file with all the JSON data in single line. This is very difficult to read. I can use the indent keyword argument to indent my JSON string to make beautiful looking JSON file. Here I'm writing indent value of 2. Let's execute the code again and check the file. This time it writes pretty looking JSON file. If I want to sort all the keys into alphabetical order, I can pass another keyword argument, sort keys, as true. If I run this code, you can see that it has sorted all the JSON object keys into alphabetical order. This can be very useful depending on your requirements. If you want to write only specific JSON fields into the file, I can remove the non-necessary fields from the Python dictionary using del operator. Let's say I want to remove the address and email address information from all the users' data. For that, I can first loop through users using for loop. For user in JSON users, del user email field. Now you would think that you can similarly remove the address field. If I write del user address and try to run this, you can see that it throws key error for address key. In user object, we don't have address for all users, so we have to first check if the user has address key. Then only remove that key, else don't do anything. I can do that like this. If address in user, then only remove this key from the user object. Now if I run this code, you can see that I have this JSON file without email address, and our first user data no longer contains the address information. Now let's say I want to write this data into CSV file. It's like converting a JSON file into CSV data. How do you do that? If you don't know how to work with CSV files, I have a separate video for that which gives a lot more information about what CSV files are and how you can read and write data into those files. I will insert a link to that video in the description of this video. Basically, CSV files are comma-separated files in which each field is separated from each other by some kind of delimiter. We can use CSV module for reading and writing a CSV file. So at the top, I need to import the CSV module. Now, once I have this Python dictionary, I can use that to write CSV file. Let's open a new file using with block with open users.csv in write mode with new line character as empty string and name this file pointer as CSV users. We can use dictwriter to write from Python dictionaries using csv.dictwriter. It takes this file pointer and it also needs list of columns we want to write as the second argument. So let's create field names as the new list which will hold the fields we want to write into our CSV file. I want to write ID, name, age, city, and country information into this CSV file. Let's pass these field names into dictwriter's field names keyword argument. This returns CSV writer object, so let's assign it to CSV_writer variable. Now I can write the heading for the CSV file using CSV writer.write header. I can write all the rows using CSV writer.write rows and pass our Python dictionary into this. Let's run this code, and now I have this new users.csv file which has all this users information in CSV format. Again, if you don't know how to work with CSV files or what CSV files are, please check the video in the description of this video to learn more about CSV file handling in Python. We have covered a lot of material in this video. If you are still a little bit fuzzy about any of the content, repeat yourself and watch this video one more time. This JSON module is quite important because you will be working with JSON data quite often when you are fetching data from an API. That's all I wanted to cover in this video. If you found this video useful, please like and share this video with others. If you have any questions or any recommendation, please post it in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching this lesson. I will see you in the next video.